Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 45 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we've got quite a bit of an assortment and a little bit of something different, which I'm quite excited to go through with you guys. But we're going to be starting off with a kind of remaster. So this remaster was done by JWE2, but it's originally done by NetRaptor. We've got Bacon Draco. So now this is a very interesting animal. Let's see if we can get him a little bit of visual light. There we are. So this is Bacon Draco. Really interesting guy. So, let me just get it again. There we are. So Bacon Draco was, until the discovery of the Brazilian Tapejara, it was actually believed to be the latest known Tapejara in the fossil record, and is also the first Tapejara discovered in Europe, believed to be. However, this classification and more recently has become a bit more scrutinized, so it's either been put as a basal Astarchid or a proper Astarchid, thus kind of meaning that it's not a Tapejara anymore. Thus, when Europejara was discovered, that animal was actually got the title of the earliest Tapejara, Europe's first Tapejara. But this is the first discovery of a pterosaur for Hungary, so it's still a very important animal in at least the history of something. So pretty cool. So Bacon Draco lived roughly about 85 million years ago, and has come from the middle of the late Cretaceous. It was found in a baxolite mine in the Hungary Baconi Mountains, and a rock formation called the Sesquiana Formation, which was a unique ecosystem at the time. It had a swampy forest, part of Eastern Europe as well, with small to medium-sized dinosaurs, and is the only named pterosaur from this formation, and the holotype is typically mostly just jaws. So Bacon Draco itself is about 4 meters long, so it makes it a medium-sized member of the family, and is known from its narrow jaws, which presence shows it as probably a fish eater or something like that. And when alive, the narrow jaws terminated into an arrowhead with a spear-like jaw, which made them much narrower than a lot of Tapejara skulls, which is pretty interesting. And aside from this, not much is known about the animal, and like other Tapejaras, you could see potentially it had a crest like its relatives, though we don't know because it's only jaw elements. Also, this guy was quite an adept walker, believed to be like an Astarchid. It was an adept walker like any other Astarchid, with about 4-meter wingspan. It was larger than the largest flying birds today, like albatross, but somewhat unimpressive compared to animals of it's related to, since it's considered now an Astarchid, like Quetzalcoatlus, Hexagopteryx, its relatives like that. It's kind of midway in that regard. And we don't really know its diet, but it's believed to, the other Tapejarids are thought to be a little bit varied diets, such as fish, small vertebrates, and possibly seeds. But if that's more Tapejara approach, Tapejara's made a bit more dietary, explorative. There would have been more omnivorous potentially. That's why I keep wanting a herbivorous Tapejara in the game, or Tufandactylus as it actually should be called. But I think it's fine how it is. It just depends on its placement. It could have evolved independently to become omnivorous as an Astarchid, but really, really cool. Definitely like that. Definitely interesting patterns and such. And it's technically got some Pector vibes going on. Nice little bit of a remake and brought up into the future. So really, really cool. Do love the patterns as well. So that's our first animal up. Next up, we have got by, I think it's Gereno. I'm going to say it as Gereno from now on, because there's quite a few mods that Gereno has made. We're going to have a look at some of the wonderful mods he's made. This is Ornithomimus. So Ornithomimus is a really cool little guy here, even though it's more closely related to Gallimimus technically. It's in the group Gallimimudae, a really early relative of Gallimimus, but we can see some wonderful changes here. I think we're going to start off with the head. That just makes it a little bit nicer. We don't have too much, but I believe we have some from Ornithomimus. It's not like we have a complete skeleton or anything, but I like some of the changes here. I like the more fatty neck. It reminds me of like sometimes when you look at ostriches, and because their windpipes, because their necks are so thin, their windpipes kind of hang out like that. I think that makes it look a little bit more interesting. And the biggest change that I really want to talk about, the hands have been properly placed. So even though in real life they would have obviously been covered in feathers, the hands would look very much like this, with potentially a protegium coming around here, very much like a bird wing. So they would have had their arms kind of held out. The reason that birds have a protegium is because it strengthens the wings, so they're not constantly have their wings straight all the time. It basically is like they're always doing like a push up, or like have their arms in a like a V, so they're able to have a bit more strength closer to the body rather than having to go wider, and just provides more strength and power to the wing. So this, in real life, they would have a patagium, and then obviously big feathers and coming down as well. So it looks pretty spot on. Maybe the hands could be a little bit lower, but that's still pretty good. I think it's kind of just the animation, really, but really, really nice. I'm definitely a big fan. You can see that big round body that they had. You see some changes to the legs. The Ornithomimus had very long, spindly legs. That's why they get their name, because they're like bird mimics. So Archaeornithomimus, name itself means ancient ostrich mimic, because Struthio is the genus name for ostrich. So pretty cool. Now, Archaeornithomimus. No, Struthiomomus is ostrich mimic. This is bird mimic. Yeah, Struthio. Yeah. I'm right. I'm just being weird. But yeah, really, really cool. Awesome. I do love these guys, and I like the patterns as well. It really fits nice. Also, those tails have been shortened, or I think actually lengthened a little bit. Maybe I just haven't played too much with Archaeornithomimus to realize. But yeah, these guys had long tails as well, covered in feathers, tail fan, all that. So yeah, really, really awesome. Obviously, other than the feathers, I really just like the new design. It's really cool. So Archaeornithomimus. This is part of an ornithomimid pack that Gereno did, which is really nice. So next up, we have got Struthiomomus. Oh, so that's looking a little bit better. So not too many changes, I think, to this one. But we can see those hands are looking a little bit better. We can see here some changes to the skull. A little bit bigger eyes. A little bit like rounder head. These guys probably did actually have like a much more bird-like head. Very interesting. At least looking at the skeletal that I am here. Got these longer necks as well. So these guys would have had quite a decent long neck. Longer body as well, much more oval as well, so it looks quite interesting with the Grasgalia going down here, and he's got these really big arms, which I actually really, really like, and the placement is actually so much better. So you can see, instead of holding up like Jurassic Park raptors, where they're like bunny hands, they're pronated and held down to the side, and in life, as I mentioned, there'd be a protagium going through there. Maybe I'd hold it down a little lower, and then the feathers would come off from the middle finger and go out like that. So really, really cool. Longer body. You can see those long spindly legs. Because basically past this point, it's all tendon down to there and fat on the toe pads. So much more bird-like feet, very similar to the Archaeornithomimus. Really, really cool. And also that little bit longer tail, which makes it a little bit nicer. Looks actually fits pretty well. I'm really like this. I think this is pretty good. So fits much better. So really cool. So that's our Struthiomomus. Yep, that is Struthiomomus, because Struthiomomus is a genus. Struthio is a genus name for ostrich. Ornithomimus is just like ancient bird mimic. So yeah, just correcting that. I'm having a bit of a off day. So here we have Gallimimus. So this is the last member of the pack. Probably the one that everyone wants to see the most, because it's a cool animal. So this one I quite like. Looks really nice. Gallimimus is definitely quite a bit bigger. It's like 6 or so meters long. It's like in this. It's like a medium size. You have like things like Struthiomimus, then you have Gallimimus, and you have big things like Dreadnoughtus. Not Dreadnoughtus. Dinosaurus. What is it? Dreadnoughtus. I suppose that would be whatever. I'm a bit frazzled today. I've kind of had a busy week. But anyway, we're having a look at these wonderful guys. So let's see. Where's one out here? There you are. We'll have a look at you, because why not? Really nice colors. So we can see some changes to the face here. Definitely does not look too bad. So you can see those wonderful faces. much like larger beak. They've got a quite wide beak. I don't know if he's removed the teeth, but I mean, I think they didn't really have teeth. I'm not sure actually. But yeah, really, really cool. Like the changes to the head really fits much better with Ornithomimus. I'm not Ornithomimus, Gallimimus. That longer neck as well. And also got that quite bulky body, more similar to Struthiomomus. Really, really nice. Got that long tail that's been lengthened. And I like these arms and legs as well. You can see some of the changes there, made very much properly. I would say it probably should look a little bit more like the ones from Struthiomimus. That one's like perfect because the hand's a little bit too turned backwards. But other than that, I think it's perfectly fine. Like those big arms there are really, really cool. Just actually looks like a proper animal for a change, which is so awesome. And you can see those long spindly legs because birds and ornithomimids and things like that, they just have these big thighs and calves, and then it's all tendon from down there. And I love the changes to the feet. Really looks much more bird-like, like those of an emu or a cassowary, rather than the fat, like overblown dinosaur feet that Jurassic Park has. But yeah, really awesome. So we're going to be moving on. We'll let them run off and do their thing. Gosh, there is a lot of them, so we're going to let them run off. Next up, we've got a new dinosaur. Let them run off and do their thing. I just don't want them blocking my habitat. Let them run off. Next we got, this is by Darth Summit, we have got Dinosaurus. So this is a nice guy. So this is Dinosaurus, which Dinosaurus means buffalo lizard, which is a combination from the Blackfeet Indian word for buffalo, which is Eni, and Saurus, which means lizard in Greek, so basically the buffalo lizard. So these guys were a centrosaurine ceratopsian, so related to Centrosaurus and Styracosaurus and things like that. These guys were the Upper Cretaceous, around the Campanian age of northwestern Montana, with the science-specific name Provocurus, which means forward curving horn, which was named because of that big curving horn it's got on its face, which is quite obvious. And really cool animals. So this guy is only really known from Montana and was discovered in 1985 by Jack Horner and by other field crews, things like that. And he'd not really been searching for horned dinosaurs, things like that, and kind of just found it on a whim. And it's been a species that people have an issue of identifying. Some people considered it a species of Styracosaurus or another species of Styracosaurus, or even just people looked at it was different and even thought it was like a traditional taxon and things like that. But then in 1994, Horner's Taxon B, which named Dinosaurus provocurus, which was described by Sampson. And really cool that they gave it its name. So it's the buffalo of the Cretaceous, and that kind of reflects that these guys would have been to honor the Blackfeet tribe that reflect where the animal was from, which was pretty cool. And the holotype was found in the Two Medicine Formation, which dates basically like Companion, and includes a partial skull that includes that nasal horn where it gets its name, part of the skull, things like that. And the skull represented an adult individual, so that's also quite cool. And in terms of its size and description, these guys are pretty run-of-the-mill. They are about the same size as a lot of other ceratopsians, but not quite as robust. In 2010, it was estimated these guys were about 4.5 meters long, or about 15 feet long, and weighed about a little over a ton, or 1.3 tons, which fall within the typical size range of most ceratopsians or centrosaurians. And there are a few distinguishing traits. They have that nasal horn that's really, really weird. It's got the down curve to it, which is a lot of people thinking, like, if they use it for defense, why would they do that? And it's kind of suggested a lot that it could be because of like more social displays and things like that, rather than using horns for defense. But it's really only described from the skull, with the holotype having quite a large skull. It was a total length of about 1.6 meters, or 1.5 meters long, with a few different horns, things like that. So really, really cool. And as I mentioned, it is within Centrosaurine, so it is related to animals such as Centrosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, and Styracosaurus, with its closest relative being Allosaurus, and then coming to into Pachyrhinosaurus. So, in terms of its paleobiology, low diversity and single species bone beds are thought to be dying of catastrophic events, and there is evidence with Inosaurus and other dinosaurs such as Pachycephalosaurus and Centrosaurus. They may have been herding together, very similar to modern day bison or wildebeest, where they would have been moving in large herds and migrating together. Though, in contrast, there are centrosaurines or ceratopsian, like Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops may have been more solitary, though there is actually fossilized footprint that actually showed the contrary. It really just depends on who you ask. It's really hard to tell social group things from fossils, but both are very likely. And if you look at bovids today, there's so much variation that each species could have a different social structure, so it's not too much of a drama. And in 2010, they actually did a bone histology, and they actually concluded that Inosaurus actually grew quite quickly, and it lived for its third to fifth year. It would have grown quite fast, and then growth would have slowed down as it became sexually mature. So it became sexually mature at about 5 or so years of age. And like other ceratopsians, they had a complex dental battery that allowed them to process plants and things like that, which is really cool. And the habitat it was living in is known as the Two Medicine Formation, which is dated back to the mid to late Campanian stage of the Cretaceous, so about 74 million years ago, and lived with animals that we all know and love, such as Ornithomimus, Maiasaura, Prosaurolophus, Hipparchosaurus, Euoplocephalus, Edmontonia, Daspletosaurus, Bambiraptor, is Troodon, but Styracosaurus, I believe it's his proper name. And the climate that it would have lived in was very similar to warm seasonal areas and semi-arid. And other animals that have been found include freshwater bivalves and gastropods that show that the areas that the holotype was buried in was very much like a shallow lake environment. So really, really cool. Definitely a cool animal. Dark Summit has really given us a good look at this wonderful animal. So we'll let them run off and do their thing. Just as long as you don't run in front of, like you're doing right there. We don't want that. So we'll have to wait for these guys. So let's release the Troodon or Styracosaurus. So, even though everyone calls it Troodon is actually based on some pretty undiagnostic teeth, so it's really hard to tell them apart from other dinosaur teeth. So that's why it's not really used anymore. Usually it's considered Styracosaurus or Stenonicosaurus, I believe you pronounce that. You can try and figure that out yourself. But really, really cool. We're going to have a look at this wonderful changes here. We can see that much bigger, rounder head. The Troodontids actually did have quite bulky heads and also quite large eyes, where it's characteristic of their group. They've got these big eyes, and they've got very interesting teeth that implies that may have been partly omnivorous as well, which is quite cool. We mentioned the giant kind of relatives of these guys from Alaska that have got about 50% bigger, and that could have been because they had larger eyes and been able to survive in the cooler temperatures of that place, over like the Prince Creek Formation, I believe, and things like that. And there's other relatives, other troodontids like Latiphonatrix, that actually got quite big as well. So really cool. So you can see the changes to the face here, much more rounded. Fits much better than what we know of Troodon, because I believe the Troodon of the game is kind of a little bit weirder. Also quite a bit thinner, because they are quite thin laterally as well. But you can see the big eyes there. Big round necks. Obviously covered in feathers, but we don't see that here because it's Jurassic Park. Or at least this is just what the original was. You can see that big round body, very similar to like dromaeosaurs, things like that. The arms, we keep mentioning how wonderful they are. You can see the big changes, such as the pronation of the hands, so they're clapping all the time. If this was real life, you could have the skin going through there, and then you have the feathers coming out, and then from the middle finger. They would say it's probably a little bit too far back, but you can see the pubic boot there as well. Longer tail. Nice that we get to see dinosaurs with longer tails. And then we can see the wonderful big bulky thigh there, and you can see the calves, and then it all comes down to those feet. Though I'd say the feet probably need a little bit more of a bulking up. They look a little bit spindly, but we can also see the really cool little dew claw there. So they have dew claws very similar to Dromaeosaurus, things like that. But yeah, overall, really, really nice. I'm definitely a big fan. Like these guys very much. So that was done by Gereno. Gereno? I'm going to say Joy Reno. That's what I'm going to say and stick with it. So yeah, really cool. And now we're moving on to our next animals here. So next up, we have got Herrerasaurus, also done by Gereno. So here's some cool changes to this guy. So let's see if we can find one that's kind of in a good posse. There it is. So we can have a look at that. Very interesting changes to the skull. Got like much more of a bulky neck as well. Big boxy head, because these guys were kind of the first big predatory dinosaurs on the scene, and they may not even be that closely related to theropods, maybe more closely related to sauropods, but almost like a big crocodile-like head. Got these big lips and the big jowls. I like that. And we can also see some changes to those hands. They look so much better. You can see that there. So holding it back, and then also having that. They wouldn't have evolved those like Propatagium and things like that I keep mentioning, but they would have had their hands held back and pronated, so they look like they're clapping all the time. So yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see changes like that. Changes to those body. These guys were actually quite bulky. I believe they get up to size of like 5 to 6 meters, so even probably bigger than that. I don't recall off the top of my head, but still a really big, bulky animal. Basically the T-Rex of like the late Jurassic at the time. Very interesting. So this is at the time, because most of the Jurassic, there were dinosaurs, but they didn't really become prominent in the ecosystem until like the late Jurassic. I mean, not the late Jurassic, the late Jurassic. That's when you get things such as Herrerasaurus and things like that. But yeah, really, really cool. Big, bulky body, and see those big, powerful legs of a big predator, and the big thighs as well, and that longer tail. As I keep mentioning, JP makes to make their dinosaur tails way too short, so that looks much nicer in my opinion. Really, really big fan. So didn't need too many changes from the original. It's actually pretty good. But yeah, nice work, Gereno. Might have to cover more of these mods at another time. Really, really cool. So let them run off and do their thing. Next up, we have got returning fan favorite. We have got OG Bear with his own remake of the Megalosaurus. So really, really cool. I'm glad Megalosaurus is getting all these kind of remakes, because it's such a cool dinosaur. It's the first one ever discovered, and pretty much, and has a very important place in history. But we can see some of the big changes here. This is based, instead of having that big Sudan-like head, you can see some of the wonderful changes here. These guys are megalosaurids, so more closely related to things like Torvosaurus, and actually potentially the early relatives of things like Spinosaurus. So you can see that big boxy head going on there. Looks really nice. Big fan. OG Bear always does great with anatomy and patterns, I think. So you can see the changes to the head there. And that little bit longer neck. I really like that S shape it's got to it. And I think the patterns and the scales actually fit really well on the newer version. You can also see Torvosaurus and Megalosaurus had those really big hands. You can see they got that big dew claw. These guys may have potentially be eating like some sort of like preferred aquatic habitats. Maybe just living close to rivers and things like that, but not necessarily fishing like a Spinosaurus would. But that has been hypothesized in some species like Torvosaurus. Really, really cool. But these guys most likely would have been generalist predators hunting whatever they could find that they could kill. Like most predators are. I think people often try to put dinosaurs into neat little boxes, but animals don't like fitting into neat little boxes, so that just is what it is. Then you can see this quite big, powerful arms there, those big round body, really, really cool. Large thighs, and I like these feet. I like the big bulky feet with all the much more bird-like, big bulky fat pads to help support their weight as well. So yeah, really, really nice. We do love ourselves a nice big chunky feet. And then we have that long tail. As I keep mentioning, that they keep making their dinosaur tails too short. And I've got to make a note of the pattern, because I think OG Bear, what really sets them apart from a lot of the other modders, because a lot of modders that do paleo edits will just like edit the model. He'll edit the skins and makes them look so much better. I really love like the teardrops things going down here and the spots and these on the tail and the thigh here and also on the arm. Really, really interesting pattern. And I think it looks really, really nice. He's definitely very, very good with that kind of stuff. I do love it. Very awesome. So we're going to let them run off and do their thing. So, oh, they're going to do animations. I just want them to get out of the way. Just wait for them to get out of the way. But anyway, so that one was done by OGB. Now this one, these are cosmetic different species. So this is part of a pack that was done by Master Doot. So he has like a couple like Jurassic Park variants, but he also has some little juvenile ones, but those are based on Jurassic Park ones, so I won't cover them. These are the new species cosmetics he's made. So we're going to be starting off with the most common species of Allosaurus shown, and I can talk about a little bit of the differences as well. We have got Allosaurus fragilis. So Allosaurus has a little bit of an interesting taxonomic history. There's been up to like 6 or so species described, and there's a few other genera that I'll be getting into, like Sorophaganax, that have potentially just the same. But we can see here, this is Allosaurus fragilis, as we can look into the, of course, in here. So we can see this is the fragilis skin. It's basically like a cosmetic, so it's the same way you'd pick like the skin for the 2022 Battle of Bedrock Allosaurus. You just go in there and select it. So it isn't a new variant, it's just a new cosmetic skin. But you can see here, it looks really, really nice. I like the pattern and stuff, and then the red there. Looks really cool. Does really do fit the Jurassic Park. But you can see some of the changes, especially on the face, because a lot of them are described from the face. So A. fragilis has got quite a tall face, almost rounded there, and it's got probably the most obvious crest, as you can kind of see there, or like obvious on the skull, but you can see it's also been extended because of the keratin. I'll give you a closer look here. And a little bit shorter at the back there, and also quite interesting jaws. These guys were very much built very similar to things such as like Carcharodontosaurids, and they were very much adapted for sharing flesh. So A. fragilis was the type species of Allosaurus. These guys were described by Marsh in 1877, and they're known from at least 6 individuals, so we have a pretty good idea of what Allosaurus fragilis looked like, and is found from the Upper Jurassic ages of the Morrison Formation, and can be found in places such as Colorado, Montana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah, South Dakota, and Wyoming. And descriptions of the humerus have been used as a diagnostic of modern theropods, but A. jemansani, which is another species, it's not covered here, is no longer considered a species. So there was believed to be at least 6 species of Allosaurus originally, which was A. ampulus, A. atrox, A. europus, A. fragilis, A. jemansoni, and A. lucasi. But in 2020, that was basically jumped down into 3, maybe 4, as we'll have a look. It was basically A. fragilis, A. europus, so that's, as we'll get into, we'll have a look at the next one, and Allosaurus jemanseni, which was based off the original Big Owl specimen, so that's quite cool. Though taxonomy being taxonomy, that could very well change, but this is the the holotype for Allosaurus and the most common named, most individual like specimens, things like that. So really, really cool, and really nice skin as well. Master Doot's done a great job. So this is the fragilis. Next up, we have got Allosaurus Europus. So this is Allosaurus Europus. See, look, we'll go into our have a look. This is Europus. So Europus is another species of Allosaurus. You can see some wonderful changes, especially the changes to the head here. You can see the size a little bit smaller. There have been remains from Allosaurus found in Portugal, which were first discovered in like 1999. And include like hind limbs, things like that. And they were originally assigned to A. fragilis, but when a skull and neck was described from the Herrerasaurus Formation in Portugal, it was actually given a new species, a Europus. So it shows that there are some differences. There are a lot of species that are similar between the Portugal and Morrison formations, the Herrera and the Morrison, because this was just as the Pangea was splitting apart. So there's a lot of similar species there. You have like Luster Titan and Brachiosaurus. You also have Torvosaurus in both formations. You have like Miragaia and Stegosaurus, for example, in those formations, but still really, really cool. So when that skull was described in partial neck, it was from the Herrera Formation. It was described as its own species, Europus. And the species appeared a little bit earlier in the Jurassic, so Europus is a little bit older than Fragilis, I believe. And it differs from most other species of Allosaurus mainly by its size and differences in the cranial area, in the head. As we can see, A. Europus is kind of a little bit more leaner and meaner. You can see some little changes there. A little bit leaner and meaner. Most of them are pretty small changes, but you can kind of see the different profile there. It's got a little bit of a like a leaner skull, a little bit less obvious crest there, though that could do a little bit of keratin. A little taller or a little bit thinner. You can see it's not like things you can see right off the bat, but you can see some slight differences when you compare the skulls. So it very likely could be a close relative. So yeah, well, they are the same genus after all. But yeah, really, really cool. So this guy, unlike the Morrison Formation, which is in North America, these guys are from the Herrera Formation in Portugal, which is obviously in Europe. And they would have been living with animals such as Luster Titan, which is an analog to like Brachiosaurus, as I mentioned, Diacraeosaurus, or how we saying Diarrhenosaurus, which is like the European equivalent of a Diplodocus, for example. So very similar formations and like ecology. They just would have been slightly different times and areas and slightly different habitats. Like Torvosaurus, like Guernii, was found in the Herrera Formation, is quite a bit bigger. So it's very likely that in Europe, Torvosaurus was kind of the bigger one, and then was a little bit smaller potentially in Morrison, where Allosaurus was potentially a little bit, because a Fragilis is a little bit bigger than Europus, but still really, really cool. Though that might change depending on who you ask, because the taxonomy of our next guy. So this next one, also done by Master Doot, we have got everyone's favorite big bad, maybe Allosaurus, maybe another thing. We have got Sorophaganax. So here we've got Sorophaganax. You can see in here, we can go, oh, Sorophaganax, hello. So we can have a look at these wonderful guys. We'll just have a look at you, because why not? We'll let them walk out. How about, yeah, we'll have a look at you. Okay, so we can see Sorophaganax is not that well known. It's sometimes considered a junior synonym of Allosaurus, either considered its own species, Allosaurus maximus, or it could be just a larger adult A. fragilis. Some people even suggested it may be a Carcharodontosaurid. It's very interesting. We'll get into that. But as a large Allosaurid dinosaur, it comes from the Morrison Formation, so about the same time as Fragilis, and found in Oklahoma, United States. So its name means the Lord of Lizard Eaters, which is a really interesting name. And it represents a very large Morrison Allosaurid because it has the basal neck spines as well and meat chopper severons, and would have been, at the time, the largest terrestrial carnivore in North America. So at about 10 meters long, or about 34 feet, and about 2.7 to 3.8 metric tons in body mass. So it was first discovered in 1931 or 1932. They covered the remains in Oklahoma. It was named Sorophaganax maximus, as I mentioned before. Later, it was discovered that Sorophagus was actually preoccupied by the tyrant flycatcher, which is an extant early eater of true lizards. So Sorophagus is a type of the tyrant flycatcher. So now it was named Sorophaganax, and is also the state animal of Oklahoma, state fossil of Oklahoma. And there have been other remains found. I believe there's been like the neural arch as well, and much as informally called Saurophagus maximus, but Sorophaganax maximus, and they contain the disc-articulated bones of about 4 different individuals. So it's quite interesting. And the relationship with Allosaurus is something, as mentioned, is quite disputed. The identification of Sorophaganax may be its own genus, so it may be Sorophaganax maximus, or a species of Allosaurus, Allosaurus maximus, and some people even consider it basically a just an adult Allosaurus fragilis, which actually does have some evidence to it. So they all do have potentially some evidence to it. And though most recent kind of things have kind of suggested it may be a distinct genus, that there is actually possible Sorophaganax material from New Mexico, which actually help clear up the matter and help clear up the status, so which is quite cool. So Sorophaganax would have been the largest animal in the Morrison Formation that was a carnivore, so not as big as the sauropods. Would have been bigger than Torvosaurus and Allosaurus at about 10 meters long and about 2 to 3 metric tons. And the fossils are known from the Bushy Basin member as the later part of the Morrison Formation, suggested that genus was either uncommon or that it appeared rather late in the Jurassic, and because of its rarity we don't really know. But the Morrison Formation, very interesting place. It's home to all sorts of really famous animals like Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and was been like full of semi-arid environments, so like a just wet and dry season, so animals would have been doing that, things like that. We lived with animals like Allosaurus, Diplodocus, Camarasaurus, all those cool things, and we have all sorts of really small animals because it's a really well-preserved environment. We have lots of small animals such as small crocodilians, small lizards, small sphenodonts, relative to modern-day tuataras, ravenfishes, frogs, lots of small mammals as well, and lots of ginkgos and mosses and horsetails to fern savannas that would have been covering the area, and very likely we have a really good idea of what the Morrison looked like, so it's really cool. We just need to know a little bit more about Sorophaganax, but yeah, this is another color variant you can kind of see there. Really cool. So if we go, I'll just demonstrate how to do it. So if you go into synthesize there, so we'll go into Allosaurus, luckily it's right here. So we go modified genome. So we want to pick one, so this is Allosaurus 2022, because I got the Bolter one. Sorophaganax Europus fragilis. So just pick your one that you want. You put it on random, very much like other cosmetics. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But last but not least, we have quite an interesting animal. We know we love our T-Rexes. Now we have OG Bear giving us a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which I'm quite excited to show off. So here is our wonderful T-Rex. So we can see, we're going to start off with the most obvious changes you can kind of see here. We can see some changes to the skull. So we can see it much better fits what Tyrannosaurus actually looked like. Tyrannosaurus has a very interesting boxy skull with, and you can see the little crest going on there. These big keratin bosses that would have been around the eye. That big eye looking right nice there. These big jaw muscles that have been used, because these guys were adapted for crushing ankylosaurs and ceratopsian things like that. Very different ecology things like a Charodontosaurus. I always keep mentioning that, but it's still quite cool. Quite interesting jaws, things like that. Quite good binocular vision as well, because if you have a look from there, these guys would have been able to have a lot of depth perception, because they can, the depth of field actually cross quite a bit, so really able to judge the depth of where their prey is, especially when you're hunting things smaller than you or quite close to you. It's really helpful. So yeah, big. Oh, I don't need to mention too much about T-Rex. I've mentioned them dozens of times, and you can. I just love kind of the changes to the head here. It looks really nice. Really does fit T-Rex. Big, round, like almost S-shaped to it. It's got very big, bulky neck for carrying those large jaw muscles and that large head. Very interesting shape to it. And you can see those spindly arms, quote unquote, but they're not really that spindly. These have been reconstructed actually quite bulky, because I believe there's been science and papers looking at the size of their arms that shows that potentially like lift 300 pounds, so like 150 kilos or so with those arms. So still quite strong. That's like a big deadlift for most people. So that's quite cool. Not too many changes this one. I think the only really major change has been the head. But you can see some slight changes to the round body there. Tyrannosaurus had quite a round body. Big, bulky. It was a very big, bulky animal. even compared to most other theropods. So if you look at Carcharodontosaurus from the front, it's very like thin and profile, but these guys are just a big, round, bulky animal, which is really, really cool. So like, if we even look up here, it'd probably be even more bulkier than this. This is, I think they OGB just pretty much just changed the skull on this one. But you see the wonderful big feet there. I think the tail also may be a little longer and bigger pubic boot, things like that. So yeah, I think this is one of OGB's kind of weaker ones, in my opinion. I just don't like the kind of... This looks like something that you'd find on a JP toy, but I know there's so many Tyrannosaur mods and things like that. It's kind of like you're spoiled for choice. But I still do like the skin. I mean, I don't like the skin as in what it is, but there's really interesting colors, variations. If you look for something that's a little bit more... Like, it's got an accurate head and everything. If you want something that looks like that but has really out there skins, this is the perfect one for you. OGB, I'm sure if he wanted to, could make another one that's more fitting to my taste, but he doesn't have to, of course. But yeah, really cool. We're just so spoiled for choice with T-Rexes. I really like the Cretaceous Calamity one. That's a really good one. I think the one that... What's the one? Can't think of the furlong ones. I just like the Cretaceous Calamity one. That's the one that sticks in my head the most. And there's all sorts of paleoedits, things like that. But yeah, really cool. Nice to see another T-Rex, and a great way to finish off. So another one done by OG Bear. Really, really cool. So yeah, a little bit of a bigger video today, but I don't mind. So yeah, I think this will be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.